Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, What's New in Jira Service Management. My name is Laura Walker. I'm the Director of Business Development for Stratacom, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of the functionality that's been released for Atlassian's JSM tool over the last 6 months or so. Before we get started, I wanted to mention a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording today's session, so I'll be happy to share out the recording with you in the next couple days when we get it uploaded. We'll also be taking questions and answers throughout, so please feel free to put in questions and answers. There's a Q&A panel and there's also a chat panel. Please feel free to use either of those. We'll also open it up to Q&A at the end as well, so you can talk directly to our presenters today. Presenting today will be Bill Renfro, who is our JSM practice lead. He does real-world implementations of Jira Service Management all the time. We've also got Greg Gerton, who is also a practice lead, project manager, and implementation consultant leading you through. Just in case there's anyone unfamiliar with Stratacom, I wanted to do a very quick overview of our organization. We're a platinum level Atlassian partner. We've been an Atlassian partner for about the last 5 years since they entered the enterprise service management space, but we've been doing IT service management consulting since 1997, partnering with a lot of the big organizations. Providing ITSM tools since the late 90s. We support a wide variety of organizations across commercial, government customers, and in all industries. And a lot of our services focus really on modernization and ITSM transformation services. We provide everything from initial implementation through managed services and really everything in between. So with that, let's get into the content we came here to see today. I'm going to stop sharing and switch it over to Bill Renfro whenever you're ready.
All right, good morning. I have just looked at the list of people. I see a couple of familiar names, so hello to everyone who's met me before, and if not, nice to see a bunch of new names as well. We have gone through any number of implementations with customers, and so the things I'm going to show you are basically things that we've actually used with customers. As you probably know, Atlassian is adding new features quite often, and their usefulness is, I mean, they vary. Some are really useful, some are only used by a few customers. And so I'm just going to go through things that we think people can actually use and actually see. So I have a list sitting behind all of this stuff somewhere, right? Unless I closed it, which would be totally on point for me. So I have this webinar list, right? And of the things I'm going to go through. And so we're just going to kind of talk through some of the AI features first. So the first one is really simple to understand, the similar requests panel. If you've been in any ticket before, you probably know often you get duplicates, you might get some that could be grouped together. So if I go look in any one of my tickets right here, somebody else just joined, I'll let them in. You can see we have this similar request panel, right? And in this case, it's seeing a number of ones. So I could link these all together from here, which is really nice. This is great when you're doing incident management and you might have an outage and you get like 10 incidents for it, and then you can just link them all together. And I usually set it up so it's automation that'll close them all when the parent major incident closes. So this panel is pretty useful. If you look at it and you don't like it, you can take it out, right? So it's viewable in, or it's viewable in the request. You can take it out of here. I'm going to probably make a mistake here. We didn't time this, so I don't know how much time I'll have. But anyway, it shows up. You can turn it off in and out of the project with the features. So it's in these features here somewhere, and you can just turn it on or turn it off. Moving on. The virtual service agent in email. Now you have to have AI enabled in your instance, and then you have to turn this on in your project settings. So in my project settings down here, we have the channels and the virtual agent. right? We have the settings for this. So if I go look in email, first of all, you'll see that we have this. The virtual service agent does have to be enabled for the project, but once this is turned on, it gets access to your knowledge base, everything that a customer would be able to see. So if I have an email out here, which I have one ready to go, saying my keyboard isn't working, and I go ahead and send this, it's going to take, a few seconds, but it's going to actually go look in the knowledge base. And then I should, in a minute, get an email back with the knowledge base article attached to it. So that's a nice way to do some call avoidance if you're doing intake via email. I know a lot of you have some more complex methods of doing email intake. This is taking a couple seconds, like I said. But this is really new, and I haven't seen any customers using it yet. I don't know, is anyone, if you're in the chat and you're using it, tell me what you're using it for. I'd like to know. But just to give you an example, we've run this exact test before, so while we're waiting, I'll just go find a response. So this is one that I sent in, right, previously. And that was me doing sentiments analysis. Usually I don't have things go wrong this early in the webinar, but again, while we're waiting, it should come back and give me the knowledge base article. So I'm going to come back and check my email here in a little bit. We'll just move on with the other things. And it's entirely possible with these new features. There are times where they're still in beta and I'll go test something and I'll test it again a day later and the behavior will have changed slightly. So that's a thing right now. All right, similar alert grouping. I don't know if you're familiar with alerts. A lot of probably a quarter of our customers use alerts at this point. But when you have alerts and you have them set up and you have on-call schedules and all that sort of thing, you can get a number of different alerts at the same time for what is essentially the same problem, right? So if I go look at all of my alerts that are out here. So imagine I have a big data center and some piece of infrastructure goes down, like a network switch or a router. I'm probably going to get alerts off of several different things. And it's smart enough now that it can group those. So you can be having one response to an outage, and that outage might have 5 different symptoms, but it'll group these together in the alerts. And if I go down this list, there's more of those in here. And so this is nice to have. It gives you some visibility into what's actually happening versus getting multiple alerts and you're not sure if you have 5 different problems or you have one problem with 5 symptoms. So some of these things we're just going to talk through and some we're going to go and actually look at. So centralized management for the virtual agent channels. This is all just set in one place now. And then we have unified drafting, testing and draft intent without having to publish something. And if you haven't played with the virtual agent, we'll start there and then I'll show you the behind the scenes what that centralized actually means. So the virtual agent has something called intents. And those intents are a defined process where you're trying to see what is actually going on in I'm sorry, I swallowed wrong. You're trying to see you're trying to define what's actually happening for your customers, right? So if you go into the virtual agent, the most simple version of an interaction with this is it will interact with your knowledge base. So if I do the same example about my keyboard is not working, it's not going in and looking at an intent right now. right? It's actually just checking the knowledge base. And so it grabbed a knowledge base article, it gave it back to me. This is also what I should have sent back an email. I haven't checked my email again to see if it's there. So it can look at what you're doing, look at the knowledge base, and then assuming it resolves your issue, I could say yes, or it would create an issue if I said no. An intent is more complex than that. So I'm gonna go back to my HR project. We'll go into the settings. And under my virtual service agent, you'll notice I have intents. And I'm gonna go look at my intents that are out there, right? So I have this change insurance one, and this is currently in the status of test. Takes us a moment to load, so give it a second. And what this is actually doing is trying to resolve that missing piece of information you always get with new requests, right? You'll have a customer ask for something. They won't give you all the information you need, so the agent has to go back to them always immediately. So in this case, it's trying to figure out what kind of change this person needs for their insurance. So it's asking a question, first of all, like what kind of change do you need? And the options are change plans, add a family member, or remove a family member. And then it sends a message and then creates the issue, and automation behind the scene attaches the right form so they can fill everything out. Now, it used to be that you'd have to put this in live, right, to be able to test it. And then you have training phrases in here too. So these are all that they match on. And so you can have multiple intents. I use this one quite often to demo for people, but if this was live, I'd be able to go ahead and have it available for everyone in the portal. But before I make it live, I want to test it, right? So we have test mode over here. So this now has put me in test mode for my intent, and I can see if it's doing everything I want it to do before I go ahead and publish it, which wasn't really an option before. So I'll say I need to change my insurance. Am I looking to change my insurance? This is it matching that intent based off of those test phrases. I'll say yes. And I need to change plans. And so it's creating my request. There's an automation behind the scenes that's looking at the comments in this, and it can analyze those. And it attached a form now to my request. Give it a second. And now I have the right form for the action I want to have. My agent will get all of the information they need on their first touch of the ticket. And now that I've tested this intent, I can change it to live. So I'll go ahead and activate it. And that is now something that we are able to do. So the testing of these virtual agent settings is just more friendly now. If you haven't used this, it kind of has a lot of possibilities. You can make them rather complex, but then you can do other things with automation behind the scenes. I'm building out another example of this where we ask a series of questions, we store those responses in fields, then we edit, then in automation, we attach the form, we edit the values of those fields in the request, which edits the values in the form if they're tied together, and then we submit the form. But I'm not quite there yet with that one. So that's a future thing we will demo based on some new capability.
Hey, Bill, we've got one question here.
All right. What's
Do
the
you
question?
have any inside information on HIPAA compliance progress? This person mentioned it's on the roadmap under consideration by Atlassian, but since we've now signed a BAA, do we have to keep Rova and AI features disabled? Is that information you have?
It is not. I know it's a thing that people have been looking forward to and needing. Before some of the serious restructuring Atlassian did last year, I was on the Solution Partner Advisory Council, the SPAC. That was discontinued, and I lost all my inside information after that. So I do know it's important, though. The healthcare sector is obviously huge, and it's something that is on the roadmap, like you said, and I can't imagine that they're going to put it off any more than they have to. All right, so this is something that's really hard to demo without showing you a customer system that I don't want to do. If you know what skim provisioning is, this is probably going to be really exciting for you. If you don't, it means nothing and is boring, but I'll go through it as quickly as possible. So to provision new users in Microsoft using Entra and dynamic groups is something that Atlassian didn't support until somewhat recently. It was there last year, but they've made improvements to it, and they've added additional identity providers like Okta, and it's all just a lot easier now. So if you're about to implement or add groups or something and your Azure people say, hey, do you do Entra dynamic groups yet? You can say yes, and everyone's life will be better from a management perspective. It's totally behind the scenes. It's usually set up in the beginning. And then it's a lot easier just to export users and get that information. Again, demoing that would be really kind of pointless, but we'll move on. So sandbox improvements and data migration has been greatly improved. Just want to make sure I'm not going to cover multiple slides here. All right. A lot of people may or may not have seen this, but in the past, copying data was kind of painful. So if I go to admin.atlassian.com, and I go into our company one, move this bar out of the way 1 second. As I'm sure you've seen, if you go to sandboxes, if you have these sandboxes, you can copy the data. It takes a while. I mean, actually, my coworker Troy just did this one this morning when we were on the phone for something we were working on, and it's still not done copying. But it tells you that up front, right? It's not something we expect to be fast. It's been something that's been out there for a while. But you have another option now. You can do it.
That it sometimes says that it's done even when it's not done. So
Well, that's
you have
what's
to let
happening
it
to
go
Troy.
for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. It copies the data actually pretty quickly. The underlying structures like automations and forms and request types take a while. So that's specifically what is, it just takes time, right? And that's been that way since they introduced sandboxes. It's never been fast. It doesn't really need to be fast. It's something you should be planning ahead for. But now we have this data management tab down here. And it's been there, right? But they've added some new features. This backup and restore is actually not what I'm talking about today. You can go there and check that out yourself, but this data transfer is really, really useful. This will take a second to refresh, but data transfers stuff between sites, and you can be selective about it. So I have this one that I created this morning, right? We're going to go take a look at this transfer plan. So in this, as you can see, I'm copying from my Stratacom Inc. main instance to my demo Stratacom instance. I have to hit back because I'm at the last stage here. 1 second. Go back to the beginning. So the first thing you do when you're in here is you have to choose what you're going to transfer. So I chose Jira Apps I will note that Confluence is on the top because that's the one you should do first. It's not only because it's alphabetical. So if you ever want to transfer between sites, do Confluence first and then do Jira. It has no problem copying Confluence data. What you may know if you've been in the Atlassian space a long time is that probably the most complicated thing in Atlassian is the permission structure inside Confluence. If you use it out of the box, it's fine. If you make it more refined and more individual to your site, you can make it really super complex if you want to. Then when it transfers, you'll have to review those permissions and make sure everything's still set correctly. The Jira apps is a more simpler process. So if you're moving stuff between sites, first Confluence, then Jira. And I had to select the sites. I figured it was better to have the transfer plan created than show you while we were in the demo, right? And so I have this, my to and my from. And then you can select on a project basis what you want to move. So I have all of these projects that are out in our implementation, right? But I only have one selected, and that's my sandbox. And so once I've selected the projects I want to move, and you can move everything, there's no problem with doing that. It has to now reconcile the underlying and related data that you need to make all of that work, like your users and your groups, customer organizations, etc. So I'm bringing that stuff over. I could bring their groups, but maybe I don't want to do that, or maybe I do. It's situational. If you're going from one internal organization to another, they're probably similar anyway. And you can decide to bring dashboards or boards and filters. And the one that is really important in here is it copies assets, and it copies assets with their full hierarchy and relationships. And I don't know if anyone has attempted to do that other ways, but aside from the sandbox copy, this is the only way I know of that really does it well. You lose those relationships if you just export and import, and you have to reestablish them. And so I actually copied all of the assets from one Atlassian environment into my demo environment using this, and it kept it completely fine. And actually, we can see that. If I go back to assets, if you're familiar with the one Atlassian environment, you'll notice that this is very much what you get out of the box in those one Atlassians. So it's a nice smattering of data that's representational of a real company for demos. So then in this transfer plan, this sharing bar gets in the way. It then has to do a bunch of validation. So you can't just go ahead and transfer, right? And you'll notice it's telling me I maybe have a problem here. So I know I'm missing some market apps from the destination that are on our main instance. In this case, I know that doesn't matter because it doesn't affect what I'm moving, but that is something you would have to check. When you first make one of these, every one of these says validating, and you have to wait a couple minutes for it to actually go through and see that all of these validate. You can download a CSV file if it finds a problem showing you what those problems are. And then once all of these are validated, your next button becomes live. And you can copy the data. So I could go ahead and copy this data over there now. I'm not going to actually copy it, but this transfer of data, really super useful. We used it, we had a large customer we implemented. Greg actually did that implementation, and they rolled out JSM to their organization, but they already had their little, like the one department with their own JSM instance. I was there like their rewards group that did customer, like credit card reward kind of things. And we used this tool the first time to move them into the main instance. And the only hang up we had was on Confluence permissions, like I said. So this is very, very useful if you're a large organization and you have multiple sites and you want to merge them. All right, let's move on. Okay, so journeys are a new thing. And let me go show you, let's go back to our HR project. I have something I demo quite often. I'm not going to demo it completely right now, but it comes out of a customer instance that we worked in where they had an onboarding process. And that onboarding process had very specific tasks that had to happen for every customer. Sometimes we've done onboarding with a number of customers, and sometimes that's like 5 things. And sometimes I think the biggest one, we worked with a major clothing retailer last summer, and I think it was like 40 some possible tasks that could be spawned based on one onboarding request. And so the automation for that onboarding request is pretty straightforward to understand, right? Because the tasks are all the same every time. When the onboarding task comes in, it creates a facilities request, as you can see here, and it creates something to create new accounts for their IT side and a phone and a laptop, right? Now, this interface, this way of looking at automations can be a little bit intimidating to new admins. And maybe it doesn't really make as much sense. And Journeys is a way to simplify that and also make it easier to understand. So a journey, I have my onboarding journey here. And you'll notice that this is basically doing the same thing my other automation did, but it's really easy to understand just looking at it. And it's easy to edit and add things to. So I'll go ahead and edit this journey I created. So I have like the trigger. So it's saying run when this new request type is created. And then it does multiple things down here. So I can edit this. You'll notice I only have 3, not 4 things in here. So I'll add one. We're going to create a new work item. It's going to be there are some dynamic values you can use in here, some smart values. So I can select what work type. This is a service request. And it could be new mobile device. We'll go ahead and add that. There are, like I said, some smart values available in here too. They're listed down here on the right. I'll put in the values sometimes, not always, but make this as simple as possible just for this. I can set the approvers if needed. And now this goes into my journey. It'll be added there. And I can publish this. And you can push stuff across multiple spaces. As you can see, I'm creating facilities. In fact, this is now almost identical to the first automation I showed you. So if I go create, we'll do a new HR request. This is my request step I made just to demo this. I'll just say new employee, and like in real life, we'd probably have much more information on there, like employee name, for example. So I have my new request, and what's happening behind the scenes is it's going to create this related request. It takes a couple seconds, and you'll see why in a minute. So we just hit refresh a couple times on here. So it's created the first one for accounts, the laptop, and it'll create the other two after a little bit. And I'm saying after a little bit because I'm going to show you exactly what it's actually doing. So the interface is this journeys, but the journeys is actually creating the automation for you. So if we go back into automations, you'll notice I have a couple of versions of this that have been turned off. And now my third published is turned on. And if I go in and look at this automation, it's telling me not to edit this, but small note, they've rechanged automation rules to automation flows. So if you see flow in here, that's rules, same thing, new terminology. But we have our trigger, just like any automation. When work item is created, we've got some conditions, and it's saying when it's request type equals that. I don't know what they're using these entity properties for completely. I can kind of figure it out by going through here, but they are setting entity properties in here and using them for something. But then this is exactly what you'd expect, which is it's creating the new request. It's putting in a delay. And then it's linking the work item, and it repeats that several more times. So again, you're not supposed to edit these in here. You're supposed to use the journeys. But anyway, just to review, it makes the interface for, especially for newer users, more friendly. And it's, I think, just easier to understand. Their whole pitch for journeys is making cross-space workflows that are technical and complex. And that certainly is what you can use it for. You could still use the normal automation engine for that. It just depends on which one you want to create. All right, what's next? We did journeys. We're at about the half-hour mark. I was shooting for like 35 to 40 minutes, so we don't have a ton more. We'll just talk through these. These are pretty self-explanatory. So we can now do site-level on-call schedules and escalations. So if you're, big megacorp and you've got 5 buildings and you have your local hardware team, you don't have to notify all of the hardware teams when a router goes down in one building or a database server or whatever, right? It can be tied to that. This, the demo of on-call schedules and escalation and alerts is like an hour-long demo in itself. We have that recorded. If you want to see it, just reach out to Laura, or we do custom demos for people. And then Terraform, quite honestly, I don't know anything about Terraform, but I know it is used heavily by a lot of customers, and so the integration is there now, and it just gives you more capabilities. I actually talked through this asset restore already when we were in the admin at Atlassian. I got a little bit ahead of myself on copying stuff with sandboxes, so we've covered that. And they have done a bunch of different UI, UX improvements and changes. If you've logged in anytime recently, I'm sure you've seen that. We have probably shown half of them by going through the things we went through today. And we have been seeing them roll out to different customers at different rates. Kind of depends on what you have your settings for your company at Atlassian, admin.atlassian.com, but they do roll out pretty often. There's quite a few of them. And I think that is most of it. We also have mobile barcoding that we do for customers. This is one of our add-on products. We've been using it for years now. So you can actually, the selling point for this is that it's very, very fast. So we have a customer, it's the largest school district in the country by geography, and on the first day of school, they scan 25,000 iPads out to students in a couple hours, and they do the same thing on the last day of school. American Airlines is using it to track a whole bunch of things. And, if you just want to track the location of a physical asset, device, or something, any kind of anything, it's very useful for that. I'm not technically in sales, so I'm covered the functionality side of it. And I think I will stop there. We're at about 11:35. If there's questions, I can take them. If you want to see something else, we can certainly do that. And Laura and Greg, do you have any more comments you want to add?
Leave it to Greg first.
No, I do not. So I'll let Laura chime in.
All right. Well, great. Well, now is the time to enter those questions. We'll leave the lines open. We've got until the top of the hour for any questions and answers you may have. So please go ahead and put those in now. While we're waiting for those, I will go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, if you want to track down the person who could tell you, his name is Itai Nananji. He's in a lot of the JSM presentations. Good guy, but he is the product manager last I heard, and I've talked to Itai many times, and he usually knows those things, or he can give you a hint of which direction it's going. So
Okay, and my contact information is shared here. If you have any questions, want follow-on conversations, custom demos for your team, please do reach out. Well, at this point, I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So hopefully today's content was helpful. Be happy to share off the link in the next couple of days when we have it uploaded onto our site. We hope to do these practitioner calls every quarter. So keep an eye out for future events. Hopefully they're useful for you. And we hope to have another one sometime midsummer. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to being in touch. Yes.
One last thing. I just want to point out that the virtual agent did reply to my email. I think there was some kind of lag in there. It's usually like 30 seconds, but I did actually eventually get the email.
Great to hear. All right. Well, with that, also, if any of you are going to team next week, we will be there. We would love to see you. Reach out, let us know if you'll be there. We'd love to grab coffee with any of you and look forward to seeing you on the next event. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.